So in our previous video, we set up some basic styling so I was ready to start building out our application. And the next thing we need to do is set up Laravel Fortify and create our login and register pages so users can register with our application and then also they can log in. So one of the first things we need to do is register the Fortify service provider inside of our app config. So if you come under config and drop down to app.php, and if you scroll down to the providers array, you need to add in Laravel Fortify here. So to keep things neat and tidy, I'm just going to put it at the bottom of this array under the other application service providers. And then we're just going to bring that in. So I'm going to do app providers and then bring in that Fortify service provider. So now our application is aware of the Fortify service provider. So the next thing we need to do is let Laravel Fortify know where to find our login and our register views. The next thing we need to do is let Laravel Fortify know where our login and register views are going to be. So let's open up app providers, Fortify service provider, and then inside of this boot method, this is where we're going to register our views for login and register. So just inside this boot method, we're going to call Fortify and we're going to register view. And then this accepts a closure as the first parameter. And then inside of the closure, all we have to do is return our register view. So we can just do a return view. Now, I've not made this register view at the moment, but I'm going to put it into a auth folder to keep things neat and tidy. And I'm going to call it register, as this is going to be the form where a user registers. Now, while we're here in this file, we might as well also register our login view. So again, we're just going to call Fortify, and then we're going to call the method login view. And then in the same style as above, this accepts a closure in, and then you simply just return the login view. So we're going to do a return view. And again, I'm going to create this view in an auth folder, and I'm going to call it login. So that just keeps everything neat and tidy and grouped together, so it's easier to manage as your application grows. So now back over in our application, if we actually try and go to one of these login or register routes now, so we'll go to register first, as we're going to be doing that first. You can see now it's saying it can't find our register view, and that's correct because we actually haven't made it yet. So back over in application under resources views, I'm just going to create that auth folder in here now. And then also I'm going to make the register and login blade views. And then inside of this auth folder, I'm going to do the register view first. So I'm just going to create a new file here. And I'm going to call this register.blade.php. Now just to get started, I'm just going to copy the index page and put that into register. I'm just going to use this as the skeleton now. But likely we're going to be creating another template for the login and register views. So we're not showing the menu until a user has logged in correctly. But for now, we're just going to use this as a skeleton. Let's just give this a h1 tag here of register, just so we can check this is working. Now back over in our application, let's give this a refresh. And there we get our register page. So we've now configured Laravel Fortify and it knows where to find our register views. So the next thing we need to do is actually just build up that register form. So I'm going to head over to the Bootstrap documentation again and just copy over a basic form. So over in the documentation here, we have a basic form. And this is a login form anyway, so this will give us a good start for the login page, but it also gives us a good start for our register page. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste this into our register blade view. So I'm just going to get rid of the checkbox. I'm going to copy down this password input for our password repeat. I'm also going to copy the email so we can put a name in. So let's just change some of these defaults out. So I'm going to put this to name. I'm going to put name here instead of email address. Let's give this an ID of name. Update the array tags to name. And the type is going to be text. I'm just going to get rid of this help section here because we don't need that. And then for the email, I'm just going to change this out again just to be email, just to make it a little bit easier to read. We don't need the example boilerplate. And again, I'm just going to get rid of this email help ID here. We don't need that. In the for part, I'm just going to change this to password. Give it an ID of password. And then I'm just going to change this for tag to password underscore confirmation, and also set the ID to password underscore confirmation. We may use this later in the video, I'm not sure yet. Okay, so now we need to give our inputs names. And these names are important because Laravel Fortify is going to be looking for these names when we send a post request off to the register route. So for the name input, we need to give this a name, and we need to give this a name of name. And then for the email, we need to give this the name of email. And then the password input, that needs the name of password. And then the password confirmation needs a name of password underscore confirmation. Now, when we send this request off to Laravel Fortify, it will apply some validation rules and check that the input's valid. If it's not, it'll send an errors array back down to the form with the errors listed. And we probably want to show them out to the end user so the end user knows what they've entered incorrectly. So underneath each of our inputs, we can use the blade helper at error, and we can say, is there an error for name? And then we'll just do at end error here. And if there is an error with name, let's do a span tag, and we'll give this a class of invalid-feedback, and we'll give it a role of alert. And then inside the span tag, we can just use the blade curly braces syntax and print out the message. So if there is an error passed back down from Laravel Fortify and it's got a key of name, then we'll just print that message out. Now let's just copy and paste this error block for the other fields. So we'll just copy this down, and instead of checking for name, we want to see if there is an error for email. And then again for password, let's just check if there's an error for the password field. Let's just take a look in the browser, see how this is going. So there you can see now we have our register form set up with the name, email, and password confirm. So now let's hook this up into Laravel Fortify on the back end. So up in our form tag, we need to give this a method, and we want to set this method to post. And the action needs to go to our register route. So let's open up our curly braces, and we can call the route helper. And we can say we want to post this to the register route. And then as always with any form within Laravel, we need to pass over our CSRF token. So just inside the form, I'm going to call the @CSRF helper. And this adds in the CSRF token automatically for us. Now the final thing we probably want to do with this form is fill in the old data if the user is redirected back with an error, because they don't want to fill the form out again. And in Laravel, it passes the old data back to the form if it is redirected back. So on the input here for name, we can set the value, and we'll open up our blade syntax again, and we can call the old method. But then this just accepts in a key, and this case is name. So we're saying if there is an old name sent back down, then populate the value of this form with that. So now we can just carry on doing this for the other fields. So down on the email input, we can set the value to old, and then check if there is a key for email in the old array that's being sent back down. So if you have seen my Laravel Fortify series, you'll know that you need to add one more thing here into the class so that it will display errors. So in each of the classes here where we're going to be displaying errors, we need to apply the isInvalid class. We can add this in by coming up into our class. I'm going to do name first, and we can call the error helper again. And does it have a key of name? Then we just close that off with end error again. And then if there is a name error, we're going to apply the class is-invalid. And now we can just copy this down for our other fields. So check for the email key and apply the isInvalid class if it's there. And then again, the same for password. We can check for a password. Now let's try this out in the browser. So I'm just giving this page a refresh. I'm just going to put my email address in, but leave everything else blank. Now let's submit this form. And you can see now that Laravel Fortify has passed the errors down, and we're displaying them out. It's telling us the name field is required, and also the password field is required. So now we know that the validation is working. Let's go on and register a user. And I'm just going to submit this now I've filled it out correctly. And you can see that now redirects us to /home. And this gives us a 404 error because we actually haven't set up a home route. But that doesn't matter so much for the moment anyway. It just means that our register form is working. So let's jump over to our database and check whether this user has been registered correctly. I'm just going to log into my database. For me, it's MySQL. I'm just going to use that database we set up, in my case, login 8. And then I'm just going to select star from users to list out all the users that are in the database. And you can see now we have a user registered with the email address, and obviously the password is hashed. But these are the details that we passed across in our register form. So now we know what our application is registering its users correctly. Let's build up our login page. So back over in our application under resources, views, auth, I'm just going to copy this register view that we just created and just paste it in here, but rename it to login. Now I'm just going to change the H1 to login. And then instead of the action register, I'm going to change this to login. We can get rid of the name input now. We're going to keep the email and we're going to keep the password. But I'm going to get rid of the password confirm. Let's just change that button to login. And that's everything we should need now to get the user to log in. Now you did see when we registered a user, it redirected us to /home. And this is the default for Laravel Fortify. But we don't have that route at the moment. So let's just change this in the Laravel Fortify configuration. So under config, let's open up our fortify.php config. And if you scroll down about halfway down the file, you can see here you define the home path. So at the moment, it's using our default path from our root service provider. So let's change that in our root service provider. And that's under app, providers, and then root service provider. And you can see here at the top, it's got a public constant called home, and that is redirecting to /home. So for now, I'm just going to set this to /, but later on in the video, we'll probably set this to like a dashboard or somewhere else within the application. But for now, while we're getting up and running, let's just redirect back to our index page. So back over in our application, because we have a user logged in, we need to log them out. And we can do this for now just by deleting the cookies. So in your web browser, press F12, and then in Chrome, come under application. And you can see we have cookies set here for our Laravel session. So this is how Laravel knows we're logged in. And I'm just going to clear them. Now other browsers might have a slightly different layout in the developer tools, but you'll be able to find the cookies and clear them within the developer console. Now if we just go back to the index page of our application and we go to login, we can now see we can actually see our login form. So let's just try and log our user in now that we just registered with. And then we're just going to hit login. And you can see now that redirects us back to our index page because we configured that in our root service provider. And you can also see the links up here now, the login and register links are no longer showing. It's showing us a link to the home page, a page that we actually haven't created yet. That's just the default within Laravel. But now we know we've got our login and register process fully set up and it's working. The users can register and then log in. So the final thing we want to do in this video is create the logout link. Now if you head back over to your terminal and run a PHP artisan root :list, we can see here Laravel Fortify creates the logout route for us, just like it has done with the login and register. And we just need to send a post request to logout, and that'll log our user out. So over in our main.blade.php file, we already have some logic in place that we copied over at the start of the video series, where it checks if a user is already logged in. And if they weren't logged in, then we'd show the login and register route. And if they are, we're just showing the home route currently. So I'm just going to copy this line down for home. And instead of URL, we're going to use a route, and we're going to use the logout route for this. Obviously, we just need to change the text to logout. Now this link in itself won't work on its own. And that is because by default, our browser is going to send a GET request for this. But as we've seen in our PHP artisan root list, we need to send a POST request. So what we can do here, we can build the form somewhere else within our document, probably just right underneath, and hide that by default. And then you can use some JavaScript to detect the click on this logout button and submit the form instead. So underneath this, let's create a new form. And I'm going to give this form an ID of logout-form. And the action, again, just like in the actual hyperlink, is going to go to the root, and we're going to go to the logout route. And the method for this is obviously going to be the post, as that's what Laravel is expecting to see. And then finally, we want to put a style on this so it doesn't display. So let's just put in the style attribute, and we can say display, and we can put none. So that won't display by default. And then inside of this form, we don't actually have to put any fields in there. The only one that we do need to do is do our CSRF token. So we can just do an @CSRF. Now, when the user clicks this logout button, we don't want it to actually go to the logout route because it'll send a GET request. We want it to submit this form instead. So just here next to the href, let's actually listen on for that click. So we can say on click. And then what do we want to do when we click? We want to grab the event and we want to prevent the default action. So here we're saying don't do the default action of going to the logout route. And now we can tell it to do something else. Now we've prevented it from doing a default action. So we can now get our form and submit it. So we can say document, and we want to get something in the document by its ID. So we get elements by ID. And now what element do we want to get? And we're looking for the logout-form. So we can do a logout-form. I'll just break this down another line so it's easier to read. And then once we've selected this logout form, which is this down here we just created, then we just want to submit it and then just close that off with a semicolon. Now when this link is clicked, we're going to prevent the default action the browser wants to do, which is go to the link. And instead we're going to get an element in our document with the ID of logout form, which is this form here. It has the ID of logout form. And then we're going to submit it. And that'll submit into our logout route, and then it'll log the user out. So now let's just check this out in the browser. So I'm just going to do a refresh on this page, and we can see now we have our logout link. So I'm just going to click this, and you can see that has now logged our user out, and now we're showing the login and register routes again. So now we have a nice flow where a user can register, they can then log into our application, and they can log out of our application. If you're liking this video so far, don't forget to give me a like, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you get more notifications of new videos in this series as they come out. I've also got a Patreon in the bottom, so if you'd like to buy me a coffee and help me out, any donations you can make are much appreciated.